Well, I've heard the story about you and Bryan Singer on the plane and you watching the DVD of the original series. What did it feel like when you actually walked into Universal's office, made your pitch, and then to hear them say yes as a fan? What did that feel like?
Because we were both sort of flying back. We're both from New Jersey. We were flying back first class, paid for by the studio, to New York to do the press junket and to celebrate X-Men. And I'm sitting there with Battlestar Galactica, and he looks over and he's like, Battlestar Galactica. And we talked about it, and he asked if he borrowed the DVD, which he did, and he had as fond memories of it as I did, and he was a fan, and we bonded over that. And walking through the door at Universal with Bryan Singer, excited to do your project, is probably the best 800-pound gorilla anybody could ask for. So it was a project which very quickly we got answers with William Morris acting as the tip of the spear. We cut through a lot of the bureaucracy at Universal, and when they finally said, yes, let's bring this thing out and feeling. When we went in to do the pitch, I actually had to go home. So Bryan went at it alone, but pretty much by that time they had seen the box office that X-Men had done, and Universal was just excited to be in business together. And at first they were sort of in disbelief. They were like, "You want to do what?" And we're like, "We want to do Battlestar Galactica." And they were sort of like, "Why?" But one thing that we both went in with was a passion for the show, and we got the doors open and we greased the wheels, and something that had been stuck for 25 years, all of a sudden the old girl started moving again.
Well, you mentioned the reaction of the suits at Universal, and certainly that seems to be a lot of the reaction for Battlestar Galactica before it came back into the limelight. Do you think there's people that just get it and people that just don't?
Yeah, I really do.
Well, I understand that in the beginning you and Bryan were actually thinking about a remake. What changed your mind, if that is in fact true, and convinced you to go in the direction of a continuation?
Well, it was, for me, it was never a question of a remake. It was always going to be a continuation. It was really about how far we were going to set it in the future, and whether it was going to be a continuation a la Star Trek Next Generation, which was going to be something completely different, where everyone in the past was dead, and they were referenced, and you might have Bones show up in the first episode, but that was it. But I think once Bryan saw the fan base out there, he started to become convinced that it could be 25 years later, which was, I think the best way to take the show. And fortunately, we had a good take on the storyline and had a handle on the characters. And being a fan of the show, I understood the soul of it. And I know, there's no allusions to some of the cheesy episodes that were on, because I'm in agreement that there were some cheesy episodes on that original 78 series.
No one would disagree with you about that.
Absolutely. But there's also some of I think the best science fiction ever done on television. With Lloyd Bridges as Commander Kane. The Pegasus episodes were amazing stuff. It's that combined with the Count Ibley episodes with Patrick McNee. War of the Gods was just it was wonderful sci-fi, and that was the tone that had imprinted on me, and that was the tone I wanted to translate to the new series.
Well, we'd heard a lot about the old friends who were returning, Starbuck, as portrayed by Dirk Benedict, and Boomer, as portrayed by Herb Jefferson Jr., and Orin, of course, a grown-up Boxy. We haven't heard a whole lot about the new characters, though, that you were going to introduce. Can you talk a little bit about the new generation of hotshot pilots and new secondary characters and the balance you were going to try to achieve between them?
Sure, absolutely. There was, and actually one of the biggest, sort of amount of, one of the largest amount of joy I got from stepping into this project was to making those phone calls to either Dirk or Richard or Herb, or talking with Anne, and saying, hey, look, you're not going to be in the pilot, but I've got this thing mapped out for 5 years, and I want to bring you back at X point. And look, the first day we were open, Dan Angel got a phone call from Jane Seymour and said, hey, look, I know I was killed off in the original series, but I would love to come back and explore that character, and if there was anything for me, let you know that I'm open to that. And I thought that was pretty wonderful. Jane's gone on to tremendous success, and for her to say, look, I think I got a little bit more to explore with that character is something pretty amazing.
No, that would have been a fan dream come true to see that episode.
Yeah, and there were storylines mapped out, which included her character, but yeah, going back to your original question about new characters, again, it was looking into Boxy sort of becoming an adult and sort of coming to hate the name Boxy. So originally I wanted to call him Orion, and Bryan felt that was a little bit too on the nose, so we came to a compromise, and it was called Orin. And basically what he was Ahab without the whale. And at this time, the direction we were going to take Galactica was still following with the storyline of these. So it's, the Colonials fleeing, looking for Earth, being pursued by the Cylons. But what if the Cylons just all of a sudden stopped chasing? We planned to have a final battle, which happened 20-something years ago, in which several of the characters were lost, including Apollo, including the Pegasus was lost again. But then it was it. It was a great battle, and there's no word from the Cylons for a month, for 2 months, for 6 months, for a year. And all of a sudden they come across this massive asteroid belt, and it's rich in gold and ice and all the raw materials they need to survive, and also to give them a sense that they could hide amongst this sort of great desert, as it were. So the template we were using, what if the Israelites stopped at Mount Sinai and built Las Vegas? So what if they stayed? What if Adama dies, their Moses dies, and there's no more spark plug? So they start putting all of their energy towards building this massive golden calf, as it were, this massive white elephant, which was a space colony with pleasure domes and gambling centers and business areas, and it was all about that, all about building a bigger machine. And they lost their sense of purpose. They lost their sense of wanting to find Earth. But of course, those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. And they, of course, forget that the Cylons are out there, but the Cylons have come back. But this time they're a little different and a little changed, a little more evolved. And it's 20 years later. And we were also doing, when we had a female president, we had the decommissioning of the Galactica in the pilot episode. And they'd sort of gotten lazy, and they'd sort of forgotten what the past was. And the Cylons come back and do this devastating attack, again, a la Pearl Harbor, but also this is pre-9/11. And the storyline was very similar to what happened on 9/11. And that was part of the reason we ended up shutting down, was after 9/11, no one could function, including myself, for a period of about a month. We were, it was difficult to concentrate or to think that our little space show meant a whole lot of difference. But eventually, we all, picked ourselves up, brushed ourselves off, and we got back to work, and we said, hey, look, we gotta keep working here and do our jobs. And that push, though, ended up influencing our scheduled start of principal photography for Galactica. Unfortunately, because Fox Features was starting to schedule X-Men 2, there was this concern over Bryan's availability, and would he be available, how could he be in two places at one time? And Bryan was left with a Sophie's Choice sort of situation, where he had to choose one of his kids, and unfortunately, Galactica lost out on that. But Bryan was going to stay on as an exec producer and still be there as one of the guiding forces on the show. But Fox all of a sudden started losing interest.